85% of adults admit they struggle with low self-worth? Think about that for a second. That means most people you see smiling, working, posting, even achieving, secretly believe they're not enough. They carry that invisible weight everywhere. And here's the real kicker. Low self-worth doesn't just live in people who are struggling. It lives in athletes, in artists, in so-called successful people. I've sat across from people who had everything on paper, money, status, admiration, and still whispered the same question you've asked yourself. Why do I never feel like I'm enough? That's the part nobody tells you. You thought once you made more money, once you got in shape, once you finally proved yourself, that feeling would disappear, but it doesn't. It just shifts shape. You get the promotion, and instead of feeling complete, you're already panicking about the next level. You start a business, and instead of celebrating, you compare it to someone else's empire. You fall in love, and instead of peace, you worry if you're good enough to keep it. This isn't random. It's not just how you are. It's a trap, a silent trap built into the world you were raised in. From the moment you were a kid, your worth was measured by grades, gold stars, trophies, and whether or not adults approved of you. And slowly, without even realizing it, you learn the most dangerous lesson of all. Your value depends on performance. That's why you never feel enough, because in your mind, worth is always conditional. It's always something you earn, never something you already have. And let's be brutally honest here. If you don't wake up to this, you'll spend the rest of your life running after a finish line that doesn't exist. You'll chase approval, chase milestones, chase applause, and every time you think you've arrived, the bar will move again. That's the trap. That's why 85% of people walk around with that quiet emptiness. And the worst part? Most of them don't even know why. But you're not most people. You're here. And now you do know. And once you see the trap, you can start to see where it came from. And that leads us straight into Chapter 2. Chapter 2. The Silent Inheritance. The second hidden reason you never feel good enough is this. You were trained for it. Not by accident, but by design. Think back. From the moment you were a child, your value was measured. You didn't just exist. You performed. You didn't just play. You were scored. The world taught you early that love, recognition, and approval were earned, not given. It started with grades. If you get an A, you're smart. If you get a C, you're lazy. It showed up in sports. If you score goals, you're talented. If you sit on the bench, you're invisible. It was reinforced at home. Be a good boy, be a good girl, and we're proud. Disappoint us, and we'll withdraw little by little. Your nervous system learned a brutal formula. Performance equals worth. And here's the sinister part. Kids don't question the system. They absorb it like oxygen. You didn't ask, why do I only get love when I succeed? You just adjusted. You ran faster, studied harder, behaved better. Because survival depended on it, that survival mode never left you. It just grew up with you. Now you're an adult, but the scoreboard never disappeared. It mutated. Instead of gold stars, it's job titles. Instead of grades, it's salaries. Instead of trophies, it's likes, followers, houses, cars. You never stopped playing the game. The game just got more expensive. Let me give you an example. Imagine a kid who grows up with a father who only praises him when he wins. If he comes home with a trophy, his dad lights up. If he loses, his dad goes silent. That kid learns quickly. I am only worth attention if I achieve. Fast forward 20 years. He's got a high-paying job, a nice car, maybe even his own family. But inside, he's still that child chasing the trophy, desperate for his dad's approval, even if his dad is no longer around. Every deal he closes, every raise he gets, every new thing he buys, it's not about enjoying success. It's about silencing the echo of not being enough. Sound familiar? Because here's the brutal reality. Many of us are still chasing ghosts. We're still running from the childhood moments when we felt invisible, unloved, or unworthy. Those scars don't just fade with time. They get buried. And what's buried controls us the most. Psychologists call this conditional self-worth. It's a mindset where your entire value depends on what you do, not who you are. And if you think about it, that's the default operating system of our culture. That's why no matter what you accomplish, you still feel like you're behind. Because the scoreboard doesn't measure who you are. It only measures what you produce. And here's the kicker. The scoreboard never ends. Even if you make $1 million, someone else makes 2. Even if you run a marathon, someone else runs an ultramarathon. Even if you're in shape, someone else is leaner, stronger, younger. You never feel good enough because you were never trained to feel good enough. You were trained to chase the next level, to live in a permanent state of almost there. And unless you break that inheritance, you'll keep passing it down. That's the scariest part. Because if you don't rewrite the script, your kids will inherit the same scoreboard, the same wounds, the same silent chains. Let me be blunt. You were born enough. You didn't come into this world with grades or trophies or job titles. You came in crying, breathing, alive, and that was enough. But somewhere along the way, society convinced you that enough was a moving target. That's the lie. That's the inheritance. And if you want freedom, the first step is to see it clearly, to stop playing by rules you never agreed to finally admit, this game was never mine, and I'm done running it. But even when you see the inheritance, there's still something else that keeps you stuck. A force that turns the volume up on every insecurity you have. And that's where chapter 3 comes in. Chapter 3, the comparison trap. There's a quote that says, "Comparison is the thief of joy." But that's not strong enough. Comparison doesn't just steal your joy, it steals your peace, your self respect, your ability to see yourself clearly. And here's the brutal truth: you're wired for it. Psychologists call it social comparison theory. Since the beginning of time, humans have measured themselves by others. In ancient tribes, this made sense. If the hunter next to you could run faster or throw a spear farther, you had to learn from him or get left behind. Comparison meant survival. But here's the problem: your brain is still running on that ancient software, except now the tribe isn't 30 people in a village. It's 3 billion people on your phone. Every scroll is a reminder that someone is younger, richer, fitter, smarter, or more successful, more attractive, and your brain eats it up like poison. You're not comparing yourself to one neighbor anymore. You're comparing yourself to the highlight reels of the entire world. And the comparisons aren't fair. Think about it. You're comparing your whole life, your bad days, your insecurities, your failures, against someone else's best 2% of reality. They're carefully staged photos, their filtered skin, their one perfect moment that they posted and then went back to the same struggles you're dealing with. But your brain doesn't know the difference. It just sees, they're ahead, I'm behind. No wonder you feel like you're not enough. You're playing a game where the scoreboard is built from illusions. Here's a story. There was a study done on Olympic medalists. You'd think gold medalists are the happiest, then silver, then bronze, right? Wrong. Bronze medalists were often happier than silver medalists. Why? Because the silver medalist compares themselves to the gold and thinks, I almost had it. The bronze medalist compares themselves to fourth place and thinks, at least I made the podium. Same event, same achievement, completely different levels of satisfaction, all because of comparison. Now let's zoom out. If Olympic athletes, who are literally the best in the world at what they do, can feel like failures because of comparison, what chance do you have scrolling Instagram at midnight comparing yourself to strangers? But let's go deeper. Comparison doesn't just make you feel behind, it also blinds you. You stop seeing your own path, your own growth, your own wins, because you're too busy staring at someone else's lane. You might be 10 steps ahead of where you were last year. But if someone online is 20 steps ahead, you discount your progress. You rob yourself of pride. And that's the sickest part. Comparison keeps you blind to the fact that you're already growing. You're already moving. You're already enough. Now, I know what you're thinking. So what do I do? Just stop comparing? It's not that simple. You can't erase the wiring, but you can control the inputs. Limit the poison. If every scroll makes you feel worse, stop scrolling. If someone's life constantly makes you feel small, mute them. If you find yourself comparing, ask the most important question. Is this comparison helping me or killing me? Because some comparisons can inspire you, but most of them, they're just silent knives you turn against yourself. The truth is, comparison will always be there, but it doesn't have to control you. The moment you stop measuring your worth against illusions, you start to feel free. But comparison is only one part of the problem. There's another piece of the puzzle, one that keeps you chasing endlessly, even when you're not looking sideways. Chapter 4, the addiction to next. Here's the part that hurts the most. Even when you're not comparing yourself to anyone else, you still don't feel good enough. Why? Because your brain is addicted to the idea of next. You know the feeling. You hit a goal, and within minutes, your mind is already asking, okay, well, what's the next one? You buy the car you dreamed about, and by the third week, you're already eyeing the next upgrade. You finally move into the apartment you thought would make you feel complete, and suddenly it feels small. It's not that you're ungrateful, it's that your mind is running on what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill. The moment you achieve something, your brain adapts. The high fades, and then it demands a new chase. So you keep running, but the treadmill never stops. Let me give you a story. There was a man who spent his entire life climbing a mountain, believing happiness was waiting at the summit. He sacrificed, struggled, bled, pushed himself through storms, and finally, he reached the top. But when he looked out, he saw another mountain, taller, steeper, and everyone else was already climbing that one. That's what modern life feels like. No matter how high you climb, there's always another peak, another next, another reminder that you're not there yet. And here's the cruel twist. Your brain actually rewards you more for chasing the goal than for achieving it. The dopamine spikes when you're pursuing, not when you arrive, which means you're biologically wired to feel restless the second you achieve something. That's why millionaires feel broke. That's why champions feel like imposters. That's why you feel the emptiness even after you've checked the box you thought would change everything. Think about it. How many times have you told yourself, if I just get this one thing, I'll finally feel at peace? The promotion, the relationship, the number in your bank account. You reached it, and then what? Instead of peace, you felt pressure. Instead of contentment, you felt hunger for the next milestone. That's the treadmill. That's the addiction. Here's where it gets dangerous. When your life becomes one long pursuit of next, you lose the ability to feel present. You never enjoy the wins because the wins don't matter. They're just stepping stones to the next race. You never rest because resting feels like falling behind. You never feel whole because whole always lives one step further down the road. And let's be brutally honest. How many years do you think you can live like that before you burn out? Before you look back and realize you ran your whole life but never actually lived it? There's a name for this trap: arrival fallacy. The belief that happiness lives in the next milestone, that once you arrive, you'll finally feel enough. But the fallacy is this: the arrival never delivers. Look around. Celebrities with everything still spiral. Athletes at the top still collapse inside. Entrepreneurs who sell their companies for millions still feel empty. They reach the summit, and it wasn't enough. And if it wasn't enough for them, what makes you think the next milestone will magically be enough for you? Let me challenge you here. Stop for a moment. Think about what you're chasing right now. The next thing in your life you think will make you feel better. Ask yourself honestly, if you got it tomorrow, would it finally silence that feeling of not being enough? Or would your brain immediately whisper, okay, what's next? You already know the answer. The truth is, you can't win this game by playing it harder. You only win by stepping off the treadmill, by realizing that enough was never at the next milestone. It was always in your ability to claim it right here, right now. But that's hard to do when another enemy is already inside your head. One louder than comparison, one older than the scoreboard. And that's what we'll break open in Chapter 5, The Enemy Within. Here's the truth most people avoid. The harshest critic in your life isn't society. It isn't Instagram. It isn't even the people who doubted you. It's you. You are the one who carries the voice that tears you down daily. The voice that whispers, you're not smart enough. You're not talented enough. You're not ready. You don't belong here. And the sickest part? That voice sounds exactly like you. Same tone, same rhythm, same language. So you believe it. You confuse it for truth. But here's what nobody explains. That voice isn't really you. It's an echo, a collection of every wound you've picked up along the way, every criticism, rejection, humiliation, and betrayal you've ever swallowed. They don't vanish. They sit in the basement of your mind and repeat themselves like broken records. Think back. The teacher who embarrassed you in front of the class, the parent who made you feel invisible when you failed, the friend who laughed when you shared your dream. Those moments didn't just fade, they imprinted. And now, years later, your inner critic replays them whenever you dare to grow, whenever you step forward, whenever you reach for more. That's why you sabotage yourself. That's why even in your victories, you feel the whisper of failure. Because the enemy isn't outside anymore, it's inside. Let me give you a story. There was a woman I knew, brilliant, capable, creative. On the outside, people admired her. But every time she talked about her work, she'd downplay it. She'd say, oh, it's nothing. I just got lucky. Why? Because when she was a child, her older brother was the genius of the family. Every achievement she made was met with, that's good, but look at what he did. So she carried that voice into adulthood. No matter what she achieved, she heard her family in the back of her mind saying, not enough, never enough. And here's the brutal part. She wasn't fighting her brother anymore. She was fighting herself. Psychologists call this the inner critic, but in reality, it's internalized trauma. And trauma doesn't just sit quietly. It hijacks your nervous system. It turns up the volume on fear. It convinces you that safety lies in staying small. That's why you procrastinate. That's why you downplay yourself. That's why you hesitate to take the leap. Because deep inside, the critic whispers, don't embarrass yourself again. Don't risk being exposed. And the more you listen, the more powerful it gets. Here's the truth bomb. Most people think they're fighting the world. They're not. They're fighting their own reflection. And unless you learn to separate your real voice from the inner critic, you'll always feel like you're not enough. You'll achieve great things and still feel empty. You'll silence every outside critic, but the loudest one will still live inside your own head. So let me ask you directly, how much of your life has been dictated by that voice? How many times have you held back, not because you weren't capable, but because you were convinced by your own mind that you weren't worthy? That's the enemy within. And until you expose it, it will keep running your life from the shadows. But here's the good news. There's a way to break the cycle, to rewire the system, to finally stop measuring your worth against ghosts. And that's exactly what we'll uncover in Chapter 6, Breaking the Cycle. All right, enough diagnosis. Let's talk cure, because knowing why you never feel good enough is useless if you don't break the pattern. And breaking it doesn't mean chasing more. It means rewiring the way you see yourself. Here are 3 truths you need to lock in. First, redefine the scoreboard. Stop letting society measure you with its shifting rules. Write your own definition of enough. Not your boss's, not your parents', not Instagram's, yours. Because until you set your own rules, you'll always lose at theirs. Second, control the inputs. Your brain is programmable. Every scroll, every conversation, every environment trains it. If your feed poisons you, clean it. If people drag you down, distance yourself. Build an environment that reminds you of your progress, not just your flaws. Third, confront the voice. That inner critic, it thrives on silence. Call it out, name it, separate it from yourself. When the voice whispers, you're not ready, answer it out loud. That's not me talking. That's fear. The more you challenge it, the weaker it gets. Listen, this isn't an overnight fix. It's not a switch you flip. It's a practice. Every day you either reinforce the old cycle or you build a new one. And most people never even try. But you're not most people. You're here. And if you start applying these shifts, you'll notice something strange. You'll begin to feel lighter. You'll start to feel like enough. Not because you reached some new milestone, but because you finally stopped running. Now, let's go even deeper. Because there's a reason you're here listening to this, and not everyone else. And that's where chapter 7 comes in. The hidden circle. Most people will never get this far. Not in this video, not in this kind of conversation, not in their own self-reflection. They'll click away, distract themselves, and go back to sleep. But you're still here. And that means something. It means you're not just chasing surface level motivation. You're looking for something deeper, raw, real, something you can't get from the noise out there. That's why I built the Wise Joe Private Club. It's not for everyone. It's for the few who are serious about growth. Think of it as stepping behind the curtain. Out there, the world keeps feeding you illusions and highlight reels. In here, we deal in truth, unfiltered, no masks, no pretending. And being in that kind of circle changes you. Because when you realize you're not alone in the fight, when you see others tearing down the same chains, you start to believe that freedom is possible. That's the hidden circle, and you're close enough to touch it. All right, time for chapter 8. Knowledge without action is just entertainment. And you didn't sit through all of this just to be entertained. You came here because something inside you is tired of the cycle. So here's what I want you to do. First, take a second right now and subscribe. Not because it helps me, but because it keeps you connected to this conversation. If you don't anchor yourself here, you'll drift back into the noise, back into the endless treadmill, back into forgetting what you just heard. And I don't want that for you. Second, reflect. Tonight before you sleep, grab a piece of paper and answer one question. What have I been chasing that I thought would make me feel enough? Write it down. Be honest. That one exercise could expose years of illusions in your life. Third, commit. Don't just nod and move on. Pick one small action. Maybe redefining your scoreboard. Maybe cutting one toxic input. Maybe finally calling out that inner critic. Anchor the shift today, or it will disappear tomorrow. Chapter 9, Redefining Enough. Here's the truth nobody taught you. You don't become enough by adding more. You become enough by subtracting the lies. From the start, you were fed illusions. That you'd be enough once you looked a certain way, earned a certain number, achieved a certain level. And because of that, you've lived your life carrying a checklist that never ends. But what if the checklist was never real? What if enough wasn't something you earned, but something you remembered? Think about it. When you were a baby, you didn't have money, status, or followers. You couldn't even walk. Yet the people around you looked at you with awe. They held you, loved you, cared for you. Not because you achieved something, but simply because you existed. That's what you've forgotten. Worth isn't built, it's recognized. Let's get brutally honest here. You will never win the race for more. Someone will always have more money, more followers, more recognition. If your worth depends on being ahead of everyone else, you'll live in a permanent state of loss. But if your worth is defined by your own values, if you decide that you are enough by simply being here, breathing, fighting, learning, growing, then suddenly the race doesn't matter anymore. Here's the shift. Instead of asking, am I enough? Start asking, who told me I wasn't? Instead of waiting for the next milestone to make you feel worthy, decide that you already are. Then let every achievement become a bonus, not a requirement. That's the difference between chasing freedom and living it. And that brings us to the final chapter, the truth bomb that ties everything together. The piece of forbidden knowledge most people will never hear. Chapter 10, closing, the forbidden knowledge. Most people will never hear this. They'll die still chasing, still doubting, still scrolling through someone else's life while ignoring their own. They'll go to their graves thinking they were never enough. Because nobody told them the game was rigged from the start. But you stayed, you listened, you saw through the illusion. And that already puts you in rare company. Here's the forbidden knowledge. You were never supposed to become enough. You already were. The world just convinced you otherwise. So you'd keep buying, keep working, keep proving, keep running on a treadmill that never ends. Because a person who feels unworthy is the easiest person to control. But once you see it, the spell breaks. You stop chasing. You stop shrinking. You stop apologizing for existing. And you start living.